Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another show. Actually, our first show. But Joseph, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here.
Yeah, and I think we all had active weekends. What'd you do this weekend, Joseph?
I took a little bike ride, 50 little miles around Bergen County, Passaic County. It was good.
Okay, yeah. I had a friend of mine who did the same thing. It's funny. We both did 50. I rode over the Corrodon Dam up in Westchester County, and it's just a great day.
It was a good day for riding.
Yeah. Laura, you didn't do anything outside this weekend, right?
Oh, no, not at all. I think we did do something, Paul.
Yeah.
So, our company here, Nassau Financial Group, we sponsored a team of the Dragon Boat races down in Hartford, Connecticut. So Paul and I had the opportunity to be on the race team while I was the drummer. So it was a new experience for me, sitting in the very small seat, yelling as loud as I could. But it was a lot of fun, and our team actually placed second overall in our division. So it was a great day to be outside on Saturday.
Yeah.
Congrats.
It was a lot of fun. It was also interesting. Like, everybody has a tribe, and there were just some great community teams. We saw a couple of people with their couple teams. I mean, probably the youngest person on the team was 61 or 62. Had their paddles, their outfits. They were serious. They'd worked, and by the way, they did really well in the event. It was really cool. We missed you, Mary. You would have been a great add to the boat. So what did you do?
I would have been there. I was actually down at the Connecticut shore. Can't compete with what all of you done, but just took a nice, 4-mile jog, if you will, next to the right beside the ocean. It was nice, and then actually caught a local minor league baseball game. So that was fun. It was nice to be outside and among a community, as you said, and people, and maybe next year.
Yeah. So we all took care of ourselves. Now, I think the topic for this show will be taking care of others. Mary, do you want to introduce the guest and the topic today?
It's certainly my pleasure. Debbie Howard, author, speaker, and founder of Aging Matters International. You've written 2 books, Debbie: The Caregiving Journey, Information, Guidance, Inspiration, and your second, most recent, The Caregiving Crisis, What It Costs Your Business and How You Can Fix It. For the benefit of our listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became involved in the world of family caregiving.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mary, and thank you all for having me today. It's always a big thrill to talk about these issues in our society, which are so important. I am a market researcher and a Japan expert. And I became a family caregiver at 54 years old when my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And I was thrown into the caregiving experience as a marketing person, suddenly having to deal with oxygen tanks and all kinds of medical things that I wasn't trained for. And it was a really traumatic experience. I'm not going to lie to you. But it was also really good for me because I had been living in Japan for nearly 24 years at that time. And it gave me some time with my mom at the end. So that was a really good thing. And we made the most of it, I will say that. But it did inspire me. My experience inspired me to go interview 200 caregivers from all different aspects of caregiving, and to write my first book. And then, of course, as I got involved in the area of caregiving, it kind of became my thing. So I know this has happened to some of us as well in the past. You get involved in something, and it just became something that I'm really committed to the end of my life, to help the situation with caregivers, family caregivers, in the United States and in the world.
And Debbie, you mentioned Japan. Japan's just an interesting model of what potentially the United States looks like. I mean, they have a very large elderly population, and they've done a lot of kind of interesting things socially to prepare the prepare the country or adjust the country into that reality. How do the cultural, I guess, first question I've got is, how different are cultural expectations for caregiving in Japan versus the U.S.? And is there anything we can learn from, the Japanese?
Well, thanks for asking, Paul. I think it's important for us all to remember that Japan is the most aged society in the world. So 30% of the population right now is 65 or more. And that is compared to about 19% in the United States. So it's a huge difference, and we can see that in the streets. We can see that in the population makeup when we're in Japan. I think they have done a lot of good things. They do have a different kind of healthcare system. So they have a national healthcare system compared to ours. So that's a big difference right there. But even before we get into healthcare systems, when we talk about culture, the Asian cultures, including Japan, are, I believe, much more respectful of older age. And we tend to glorify youth in the United States. And in Japan, they value the wisdom of old age. So you don't get that same kind of, oh, they're old kind of thing that you do in the States. So culturally, Japan and other Asian cultures have been more likely to take care of their elderly in the home as opposed to outsourcing the care, which is what we tend to do in America. So that would be the biggest difference, I would say. I would also say that because of that long-term cultural, multi-generational living type tendency in Japan, we don't have assisted living choices penetrated as well in Japan. So the choice is not there either for families. So that's a downside to Japan in a way. And I think when we start looking at this area, we always have to look at the pros and the cons because there aren't any hard and fast answers.
Debbie, you mentioned 30%, I think was the number, over 65. How does that longevity impact the population in terms of their health? Like, are people staying healthy or they're just getting older?
Well, thanks, Joseph. I think one of the great things about Japan that I love is how healthy and we say genki or energetic the older population is. Because of these massive programs of public education and also because of the compliance of the Japanese culture, let's say, people have embraced the idea of, I need to take care of myself physically. I need to do brain games. I need to work at this. I need to work this. And you will see in Japan, for example, you will see 75, 80-year-olds riding bicycles because there's also a transportation issue there where, they're not all riding around in their cars all the time like we do. I'm not saying these are good or bad. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just observing as a market researcher. And I don't see our elderly people in our aging population in the United States being as physically active as the Japanese are. I have seen it over and over again, and I have statistics to prove it that, they're like something like fully 35-40% of Japanese 65 plus exercise 2 and 3 times a week. Like they actually make a commitment and do it. And that's not just the physical exercise, but the brain games and that sort of thing. And I think that, this proactivity and this self-responsibility about your health is what gives us that better health for longer. It's not just about living until you're 90 or 100. It's about living really well until you're 90 or 100. So we want that last 10, 15 year stretch to be really, really good. And so it's not just about longevity, but it's about health longevity. And I think that gets back to your specific question, Joseph.
If people in Japan are riding bikes in the 70s, I'm there.
It's It's amazing. I'm not saying it's perfect. No society is perfect, but there is a lot of physical activity there, in part because of the situation. Like if you live from a train station and you clearly have to walk 10 or 15 minutes a day to go anywhere, like that's different than what we have in the States. You know, you could sit in your chair all the time here. We've proven it during the pandemic. You don't have to go anywhere now unless you really make an effort. But I think what's interesting is the Japanese do make an effort to keep their physical strength and their mental strength up. And we need to be more proactive as well as we age in America, for sure. And they don't have the problem with the chronic health conditions and the obesity that we have either. And there's a lot of reasons for this. It's not like I can't give you one answer, but there are annual health checks there because of the national healthcare system, where some people, I've heard people go into an annual health check at, say, 52. Let's just say 52. And the doctor says, hey, you're getting overweight. Like if you don't lose 10 pounds, we're going to raise your rates. And it'll come out of that person's pocket, not the government's pocket. And so people are super compliant, and that helps. That helps with the overall health scene of all 65 plus.
You know, it's interesting. You were talking a lot about mindset, right? So some of it sounds like because the way the country is set up, because transportation, because X, Y, or Z, people tend to be more compliant. They tend to be more active. Are there any tips or tricks, things that you've seen through your research that you could give to the audience as tangible takeaways? You talk about brain games. How can our listeners start to bring some of this into their mindset and their thought process to bring it to their daily lives?
So I teach a lot of courses on self-care, and it's directly related to caregiving for loved ones, because that is one of the most difficult situations. And I think the first step in any kind of change is awareness. And we all know we could all do better on self-care, right? Every one of us sitting here. I would like to know anybody who doesn't have to do better on self-care. I certainly do, and I struggle with it all the time. And I'm constantly trying to get myself to move more, to give myself more time for myself, to read more enlightening things and work less while I'm watching TV, you know, all of those things. I believe that taking small steps is the best way forward. So rather than saying, you know, I'm going to have a super bod by the end of this year, right? Like that's not realistic, especially if you're caregiving. Rather, it's really useful to anchor some new behavior to an existing behavior. So I want to see everyone have self-care behaviors that are kind of like brushing your teeth. So you wouldn't not brush your teeth. How about you wouldn't not put your body lotion on after your shower without putting some essential oil drops in it? That would be really an easy thing that we could all do, even guys. You can pick your essential oil. You don't have to pick a girly one. But it took me about 2 years to change my habit, because I was doing the body lotion after my shower. That was one commitment I had made to myself. But I thought, it would be really good if I put essential oil in there, like a calming oil or a rev up oil or whatever. And I tell you, almost every time I would take my body lotion out, I go, no, okay, next time. And I would just do the body lotion without the oil. Well, it took 2 seconds. It didn't take very long. And, you know, now I made a commitment again at the beginning of this year, and I thought, I'm going to make it stick this year. Now I cannot do my body lotion without putting the essential oil drops in there, because it feels wrong to me. It feels like not brushing my teeth. And that's what we want to do with self-care. We want to wake up, say, now, I'm going to take 30 minutes to myself without a phone, without checking my phone. Do you guys pick up your phone the minute you get up?
I do.
No, look.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not to, Mary,
I admit it.
Right? It's the minute you pick it up, your bubble is burst.
Yeah.
And you can't really operate after that, right? Your brain is like otherwise occupied. So I struggle in the morning to take 30 minutes with my coffee, and I do what I call joy journaling. And I just write. I have a free, open, unlined book. I have really good colored markers. Sometimes I don't use them. Sometimes I just write. Other times I'll doodle and draw a flower. But it helps me set my intention for the day. And my days go so much nicer when I do that for myself. That's a really small thing. And even if you are caregiving, you can do that. You can do that. Does that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, let me say, after I've had my coffee and I can't believe my wife was like asking me at 2 a.m. about like Jennifer. Like, stop. Put the phone away. It's way too late. So now I have my cup of coffee. Mary, and it's steaming, and I've done my journaling. I turn on the television to watch a little bit of morning TV, and there's Joe Namath on here talking to me about healthcare. We're about to be that time, Debbie, where, everybody gets bombarded with healthcare messages, and we've talked a little bit about, the differences in our healthcare. I mean, what other country do you go to for 2 months and just see nothing but healthcare? So, what should caregivers be thinking about as these commercials come on? Helping whoever they're helping with their Medicare, their healthcare insurance. What are the questions people should be asking or not asking? Turning the television off.
Okay, so now I'm going to give you. Can I give you my personal opinion?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think it is up to all of us to be super proactive and self-responsible about our health for ourselves and for our loved ones. As long as we have the health system that we have, the healthcare system that we have, which is there, it's not national. That's okay. I'm not advocating national health. I'm advocating something better than what we have, whatever that is. But as long as it's the way it is and it's in transit, we had better be proactive and self-responsible, because I'm just going to tell you, like, when I lived in Japan for nearly 30 years, and, it was really difficult to think about getting sick and having to go to a doctor in another language. My significant other and I, we had a joke. It was just like, don't get sick, man. Like, do not get sick, right? And that's kind of where we are in America now. But, of course, we know things happen. Even in the last 2 years, my significant other had a detached retina. That happened. That could happen. And, I had a bout with vertigo. I'm 68. I had that when I was 67. I never had vertigo before. I'm not a nervous Nelly. I don't have any of the symptoms. But, wow, I had it. And it was really a hindrance to me, to working and everything else. And so I think we just have to be super self-responsible and super proactive about monitoring knowing ourselves and knowing our own health conditions and our numbers, monitoring those, and then using what we know for our loved ones. Because if you don't know what's going on with your loved ones, that's a big problem for the future. You may be looking at it for your own self, or you may be looking at it for your parents or a friend or a spouse or any combination of those things.
Is there a difference when you're caring for someone who is, I guess, mentally with it versus someone who may be somewhat incapacitated?
Oh, yes, Joseph. Thank you for asking that. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and these are not contests that any of us want to be in, right? Whether is that, yours was worse than mine or what? No, we don't want to talk about that. It's all really hard, and it's all really an opportunity for transformation for yourself and for your relationship with your loved one. And so in my case, my mother was there all the way to the end, and that was a blessing. I know friends who have suffered with their parents and spouses having dementia or Alzheimer's. My favorite uncle had Alzheimer's, and it's it's the long goodbye. It's very, very difficult. If I haven't done both, but even not having done both, I like my situation better because at least my mother was there, and we could argue and fight. It was great, right? We were like ourselves until the very end, right? We had our relationship until the very end. And that's really hard when somebody starts losing cognitive ability. It's a very hard road to hoe. I have friends whose parents and spouses haven't recognized them when they've gone to see them. And that's a heartbreaking situation that we cannot imagine until it happens to us. So there is a difference. And I think it just points up the need for us all to share our stories and actually talk with each other while we're going through these things.
So how soon is too soon to start thinking about it, right? So we have to be proactive, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our loved ones. At what point should a caregiver start to think about this, whether it's for a family member or even themselves?
Well, I think that each person for themselves ought to be thinking about this by the time they're in their mid-30s, for sure. I mean, maybe before, but I didn't really have much awareness of my blood pressure or anything like that until I was in mid-30s. I could have cared less, right? So it's hard to get people's attention. But mid-30s, moving into 40, yes, you should know your high blood pressure numbers. You should know your blood pressure. You should know your AC1. So you can identify prediabetes. You should understand your heart performance. And if you have some misfunction, like I have mitral valve prolapse, you should know that. You should understand. You should start getting some awareness around how you operate as a a physical being on the planet. And I think having a good individual plan and knowledge and awareness and monitoring gives you, a really good chance for the future. For women, it would be mammograms and, bone density. Certainly in the mid-30s, you need to get those baseline measurements. For men, I don't know men's measurements as well, but I know there are a few. And I think, it's just a matter of like let's get 3 or 4 little baseline measurements. Let's watch them for myself. And then let's start thinking about our parents, because if you're 35, right, your parents could be anywhere from probably around 60, 65. So they're getting up into that Medicare enrollment area. And it's really hard to talk to our parents and our loved ones about health conditions. It's, in America, it's invasive, and we don't want to, we don't want to go too far with anybody. But on the other hand, it's probably a really good time to start thinking about those things, around 35 for yourself and then for your parents at the same time. And you might want to start chipping away at your parents early like that, because it takes some time. Sometimes what I've seen is that it's the adult children who do not want to have the conversation. It's us who don't want to have it. Other times it's the parents are like, what? You're going to take are you waiting? You're waiting and preparing for taking my stuff. It's a really emotional area, and it can go either way or both, but we want to start as early as possible. I don't think you can start too soon, actually, in answer to your question.
You mentioned it's a difficult conversation, so any tips for how you can start that conversation?
Well, I like the sneaky, manipulative, something bad happened in the family, and I could bring that up now. Hey, Uncle Billy, look at what happened to him. He fell, and now he's in rehab, and it's thrown the family into, like a chaos. So why don't we talk about what we're going to do for you if an emergency happens? So you can talk about it in a really hypothetical, less emotionally charged manner. I like that way. I know not everyone agrees with me on that point, but we had to be sneaky and manipulative in my family. just a little bit.
Debbie, you talk a lot about creating habits and being repetitive with all of this, and I just curious. I'm sure others may find this also. Like, what are some tips regarding the different habits that we should create? Whether it's asking those uncomfortable questions, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and also having those conversations, but also just living a healthier life, whether we're the caregiver or the one being taken care of. Like, I know that's a loaded question, but what kinds of tips could you give around that?
Well, let me just start with the self-care thing, because I think, I struggle with this, and I'm not actively caregiving right now, but I have made it my business to watch myself and try to understand how I operate and what can I do to make myself operate better. And when I look at self-care, I look at 5 areas. I look at food and nutrition, which would include weight or weight control. Not seriously, because I'm 68 and I'm sorry, I'm not going out in a bathing suit anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I want to be reasonably fit. I want to be able to ski, okay? Because I like to snow ski. So, food and nutrition, keeping my weight under control, movement, getting enough movement, yoga, walking, cycling, making sure that we're getting at least 3 times of 30-minute a week, 30-minute at a time exercise at a bare minimum, and sleep. Sleep is so important. I have cheated myself for my whole life on sleep, but now I try to get 7 or 8 hours, and I'm pretty strict about it. I found myself at the beginning of the pandemic doing really crazy things. Like, I'm a late night person, so I'm up till 3 a.m. binge watching TV, and I thought, oh my God, this is not going to work. This is not sustainable. So I got myself on a curfew, and I started going to bed at midnight or 1 at the very latest. And I'm pretty good about that now. And I think watching your sleep, the quality of sleep, like, do you sleep all the way through, or are you up in the middle of the night, or, are you sleeping soundly? Do you need a guided meditation on the way to sleep to help you sleep better? What can you do to make that quality of sleep better? And then the 4th one I like to think about when I think about self-care is enlightened inputs. And this is anything you're listening or watching that is not work. Okay? Like, I don't know about you all. I'm like work, 24/7. And I found that it's really interesting for me to let myself read something a little different, like how to decorate your bulletin boards or something, something ridiculous. But, just giving myself some space to look at something a little bit different. I also like Malcolm Gladwell's podcast. I think he totally qualifies for enlightening inputs, no matter what he says. I love him. And the 5th one is time for yourself. And of course, if you can't carve out any time for yourself, you can't get any of that other stuff done. So you really have to be fierce about, like, I need this. I deserve this. And so that's on the self-care side of it. And of course, all of those things become more difficult when you're caregiving, but it's not impossible. And then I think you asked about, you'd asked about self-care and help me along, Mary.
Well, let me actually...
Go ahead.
You to that question.
Yeah, well, let me sort of I'm going to just jump in here. And you mentioned caregiving, and wow, caregiving just adds another level of stress. And just to give you my, little bit of my background is, both my mother had dementia, father had another terrible chronic disease, huge amount of stress, on myself. Next door neighbor, wonderful old couple, elderly couple, wife got Alzheimer's. Literally killed the husband. She lived another 7 or 8 years beyond her husband, right? And so how do you, great tips. Okay, so what are the practical? Are there five or a couple ideas that are special to caregivers that you would recommendations you'd make that would take a little bit of the burden or the stress away?
Gosh, there's so many different caregiving situations, and I would say be fierce about carving that time out for yourself. When I was caregiving, I had a really good situation. For example, my mom had long-term health care, and so we could have a CNA in the house 5 mornings a week, 8 to noon. The deal was that's when I would work, but actually I went to the store and I did stuff, right? I did things that I had to do. But I also made sure I got to go out on walks. And when we were watching TV together at night, I would do bands on the floor. I used those exercise bands because that was a time that I would always be with my mom, but it wasn't a good use of time, right? Just sit there watching TV. So I would do my floor exercises 3 times a week. So I think with caregivers, you must find those little, you got to double time, right? You've got to figure out where to squeeze those things in. And while your care receiver's taking naps is also a really good time to be sneaking in some time for yourself. I also like to suggest that caregivers make a little place for themselves that is just theirs, like a chair with a table and a lamp where they can read and have aromatherapy or whatever it is makes them feel good, but a physical place that is kind of like their place to come down and relax, and kind of a no zone. And you might have to share it. It depends on the situation. I remember when I was caregiving, it was just to the wall, right? Like I can, and if somebody had told me to take care of myself, I probably would have grabbed him around the neck. It's like, what are you, please don't do that, right? Like I don't have any time. But I think it's so important when we're caregiving to be fierce about it. And I found those little windows, like exercising on the floor with my mom while I was watching TV, or there's other things you could do that I didn't do that I realize now I could have done. Like I could have made a smoothie bar in the kitchen to make it easy for me to get what I needed. But I didn't, because it was like, oh my God, like there's so much to do. I'm just going to eat what she eats. It's easier. But now I think back on it, and I've thought a lot about it. And I thought, I should have made a little smoothie bar. If she didn't want it, it's okay. I could have it. So there's really, I think the trouble when you start caregiving is you're like in that emergency zone where you have tunnel vision. You don't realize you could actually do something different and give yourself a little bit of ease. But it's not, there's no magic silver bullet for that, Paul. We all know that sitting here, right? It's just you got to work at it. I felt like my self-care was pretty good when I was caregiving. I was too scared to let myself go down, actually. And I think that's the job and the pressure of every caregiver is, trying to keep yourself strong enough so that you can help.
Well, this has been great. We're close to the end of our time. Joseph, any final thoughts or questions?
Well, thankfully I'm not caregiving for anyone right now, but I may go make myself a smoothie bar. I do have one last.
Good idea.
Yeah, I like that. One final question. I know you've written 2 books, which Mary referenced earlier. Are there other resources for people who are caregiving that they can find online that you would recommend?
Sure. I'll be happy to share a couple of my free resources with you so that you can put them in the show notes. I've got a 20-point planning checklist that people can use to start getting their financial and legal papers together. I've also got a really nice list of 31 ways to show yourself you care. And this one I really like. We do an annual self-care challenge every January. It's free. It's the way that people come into my community, and we basically, it's kind of a do-it-yourself, but do one nice thing for yourself every day for 31 days in that first month of the year. And there are things like, buy yourself some fresh cut flowers, go take a 10-minute walk, go watch the sunset, watch a favorite movie and have some popcorn, things like that, right? Like really nice things that we can do for ourselves, and recognize that we are doing that for ourselves, acknowledge that that's what we're doing for ourselves. So I'm happy to share a couple of resources like that with you. And I also wanted to mention, because I know we're coming up to Medicare enrollment time, and this is a really important time for all of us as aging adults and as potential caregivers or caregivers, to think about that enrollment planning and what we might think about. And I think that, for example, it's good to look at your own, again, take stock of your own physical state, how you're doing, where are your weak points, what kind of prescriptions are you taking? You need to take stock of where you are as an individual or your care receiver. And that is a really important piece of information as you decide what kind of Medicare plan you want. So in my case, I haven't been sick hardly at all. I took the highest deductible, right? I'm a gambler. So I figure, I'm going to keep my premiums low and take the high deductible. I also don't have any prescriptions, not one, at 68 years old. I'm so fortunate. My mother didn't have any until she got cancer. Okay. So, I'm determined to get to a ripe old age with no medicine, right? Just supplements. But I have a really strong, kind of intention to do that. But other people may already be on meds, and they may already have conditions, right, that would really give us a hint that they're going to need more from Medicare. So when you think about your Medicare enrollment, you want to think about what's going on with you physically and cognitively. And you also want to think about where you want to live as you age. Do you want to age in your home, or are you more of a person who says, yeah, assisted living is great, I want to go there right now? I've been to some of them that I thought, well, I want to go there right now. So you got to think about, those two things. And also you have to think about your resources, because a lot of people think that I've again, interviewed 200 caregivers, and many people think that Medicare is just going to take care of everything no matter what happens. But actually, it doesn't cover everything. And so we have to think about these things when we're enrolling in Medicare. So, it's a very important conversation to have.
Yeah, well, Mary will help you right after with your Plan A or Plan G plan. Mary, this whole discussion is just a passion point for you. What other thoughts or questions?
I love what you just said, Debbie, because I was actually had a conversation with someone the other day, and it was a mom and daughter, and I said to her, I said, you're so fortunate to have your daughter by your side. She was advocating for her. She was helping her do the research. She was asking all the right questions. And it's so nice to hear that, and so important as, again, take stock, look at your situation and ask a lot of questions, do the research. And if you can't do it, ask someone who potentially can help you. So it's that advocate piece that you mentioned. So thank you, Paul, for allowing me to share that, because it's so important, and it's heartwarming, and it also could be you worry. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Laura.
Sure, Debbie, you talked a lot about intention and setting limits and boundaries so you can be the best caregiver possible. But we didn't get into your why. We know that what brought you to this journey, but why is it that you wake up every day and continue this good work?
Well, gosh, it's a good question. I think I might have been searching for the thing that I was going to be into for the rest of my life. and caregiving kind of found me. I'm a market researcher and a Japan expert, and I've always been fascinated with cultures and different. It could be anti-aging skincare, or it could be high-end food and beverage products. I mean, I'm fascinated by product categories and marketing, but the caregiving situation really grabbed me personally, and I also have a fair amount of outrage underlying my my actions and my commitment. I just can't believe we're living in a country as great as ours, and we have such horrible things happening with our aging population and our caregivers and lack of caregiver support. And maybe my underlying anger and outrage is what drives me now. In answer to your question, Laura, I just want to be part of making something better. Making something better. We can do better than this. This is not good, okay? So I'm just like, we got to do better. And I'm 68. I got lots of energy left. I figure I can make a contribution.
Well, Debbie, thanks so much for what you're doing, and thank you for sharing our time. We will put links to your books, your website, and any other resources that you send to us that you mentioned with Joseph. Welcome that. And also, thanks for our listeners. Join us again next week for another very interesting episode of Prime Life. Thanks.